Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are. Thank you for joining this panel today. And we are really excited to have this esteemed group of people joining us and honored to have a representation of different sectors, for-profit, nonprofit, and foundations. I'm Cheryl Carrier. I'm the Executive Director for Forward Next Generation Learning, and we work with communities across the country to transform high schools into career academies where students are learning their academics through the lens of something meaningful to them, and really engaging in authentic projects where they can develop important 21st century skills to ensure their success in their future. So today, each of the panelists that are with us recognize and appreciate partnerships to support their mission, which includes supporting student and workforce outcomes with a lens on low income students furthest from opportunity, and strategic partnerships to help advance inclusive economic growth, strengthening communities, and disaster responses, just to name a few. They may receive grants, they may give grants, they may partner with other organizations to create systems change, but they all understand the power of coming together to align resources, to learn from one another, and to challenge the status quo. I have to acknowledge that we're all dealing with incredibly trying times right now with COVID-19 and the difficulty around racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I want to personally acknowledge and appreciate that we're all dealing with this in different ways, and appreciate that you're all here with us today under very difficult circumstances. I have to say that SIS is my most favorite conference to go to, and this is just killing me that we cannot be together face to face because there's so much power in that. So thank you for all for being here. Today we'll have approximately 30 to 40 minutes to hear from our panelists, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. And if you have any questions, please put them in the question and answer box, which is at the there should be a bar at the down at the bottom of your screen that you can click to see your a Q&A box, and I will be monitoring that for questions later. So I would like, by asking all of our panelists to introduce themselves and share their mission of their organization and an important partnership that they're working on. So if each of you could take maybe 3 or 4 minutes, that would be wonderful. And Bill, I see you right here on top. So if you'd like to start, Bill, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Cheryl. So good morning, good afternoon, evening, everyone. Pleasure to be with you today. My name is Bill Taylor. I'm Vice President of Outreach and Partnership Development for NAF. NAF is a nonprofit organization. We've been around for a little over 40 years. We're headquartered in New York, and we are in the business of helping young people graduate high school, college, and career ready. We do that through a network of career academies. Easy to think of them as either schools within schools, sometimes they're whole schools, but it's a program that's designed 9 through 12 that really has a heavy emphasis on work-based learning. So students are studying about careers in finance and IT, engineering, hospitality and tourism, and health careers, and so the whole purpose is really exposing young people to careers, engaging them with employer professionals, and kind of the culminating experience for a young person in a career academy is a paid internship. So as Cheryl kind of pointed out, in her opening comments, NAV, we are our DNA, our whole organization, our founder and chairman, Sandy Weil, helped start NAV over 40 years ago on public-private partnerships through working with the school system in New York City initially. So it's literally baked into our DNA, and all of the work that we do. We've grown from one academy in Brooklyn over 40 years ago now to we're serving over 112,000 students nationally in 620 academies in 36 states. So we would not have been able to achieve that kind of scale and growth and that level of impact with the young people that we're serving without partnerships, without the support of over 5,000 volunteers on local advisory boards supporting all of our academies. That's really the work that I do personally for NAF, is helping to bring together leaders from both educational systems and industry sectors, and bring them together in the spirit of partnership to support young people. So I'm really excited about the conversation today, and look forward to a great dialogue with all of you.
Thank you, Bill. And I will say that we work with NAF often, and you're an amazing organization, and we appreciate you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Andrea, would you like to tell us about yourself, the mission of your organization, and an important partnership?
Absolutely. So I'm Andrea Riehl. I'm a senior manager on the social impact team at Best Buy. And at Best Buy, our company purpose is enriching lives through technology. And where many of you are probably most familiar with that is through our retail stores, when you walk in and you work with an associate to find a way to make your life better through all the things you find there. But where it really comes to life for me is actually in the work that we do in the community. We work closely with a lot of nonprofit organizations, both on the grant making side and in the program development side, to really make sure that we're building brighter futures for teens across the country. One of our signature programs is the Best Buy Teen Tech Center. They are located in communities around the country. And it's a safe space for students to go to during out of school time. And inside a Teen Tech Center, you find all the technology a person could need to go from novice to basically professional level in a variety of technology disciplines. So each one has a music studio, computers, where students can learn programming skills, the Adobe Creative Cloud Suite, cameras. They have a little bit of a maker space feel to them. So really they're spaces for hands-on learning, exploration, and creative expression. And through that program, we've also developed a career pathways program similar to Bill's program at NAF that really connects the young people in the Teen Tech Centers to careers that will rely on technology in the future. So that could be in graphic design, it could be digital marketing, it could be coding, programming, app development. But that program similarly also culminates in a paid work experience, as we know the importance of that as we look toward the future of work. And when we think about important partnerships, at Best Buy, we really consider basically everybody our partners. So we have nonprofit partners, we have for-profit partners, we have vendor partners. We think about it pretty broadly. But I want to acknowledge what Cheryl said at the beginning around both the COVID-19 pandemic and the current challenges with race and equity. Particularly, Best Buy is based in Minneapolis, so the events of the last 2 weeks have been very close to home for us here. And as we all know, they've been ongoing for a long time within the country. So one partnership that we're really excited about right now is with, we're building out a public-private partnership actually with the Governor Walz administration, some other philanthropy organizations, the St. Paul and Minnesota Foundation and the Blandon Foundation here locally, to ensure that every student in Minnesota has access to the internet and a computing device. As we think about opportunity and the ability to access distance learning, enrichment opportunities, particularly in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, but really always, that's incredibly necessary. So we're working with a variety of organizations to make sure that that can happen here in the state of Minnesota. And starting at home is really important. So that's one really exciting partnership that we're in the beginning stages of developing.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. And Rahim, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, everyone. Pleasure to be speaking with you all. My name is Rahim Rajan. I'm a deputy director at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I'm based in Seattle, and I work as part of our leadership team on the post-secondary success strategy. Many people are familiar with the work of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, particularly the work we're doing right now with respect to vaccines, COVID, et cetera. We actually have a major division focused on improving lives in the United States. The foundation's core mission is that all people should live a healthy and productive life. And in the United States, that really translates to opportunity and social mobility. And particularly through reforms in education, we think education is one of the critical levers and catalysts to helping people, especially low-income people and people of color, communities of color, to improve their social mobility. So in the higher ed strategy, we're very focused on helping low-income students and students of color not just arrive into higher education, but actually graduate with credentials of value that accelerate them throughout their lives and catapult them to greater opportunity. I lead a team focused on innovations and solutions to help higher education be more equitable and produce greater success for students. One of the partnerships that I'm really proud of that I've been involved in is an initiative with two other foundations called Strong Start to Finish. And it is a kind of a multi-funder collaborative aimed at ensuring that low-income students and students of color that enter college don't essentially get stuck in the trap of remediation, that they actually achieve success in gateway math and English courses, because success in those courses is so critical to their ultimate success in post-secondary. And so we're working with hundreds of colleges across states like California, Georgia, New York, Ohio, to scale evidence-based reforms and implement new innovations to make sure those students succeed in those critical English and math courses.
Thank you so much. Really important work, everybody, right? It's all around equity and making sure students have opportunities, and it's very exciting. I think we see a collaboration already. We should start working together here a little bit more. So Sarah, I'd like to turn it over to you, Sarah.
Sure. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Sarah Kay, and I work at Prudential Financial, which is a global financial services firm headquartered in Newark, New Jersey. And I love to share our founding story because I think it really just talks about who we are as a company. Over 145 years ago, our founder, John Dryden, created the company because he saw a really pressing social need that people didn't have the financial means to bury their loved ones. And so our first product was burial insurance. It cost as little, I believe, as 5 cents a week at the time. And so his charter for starting the company was to improve the economic and social conditions of working class families. That ethos is still within the company today. We are focused on making sure that everyone has the opportunity to achieve financial security. I work in a group called Inclusive Solutions, and I oversee our strategic philanthropy, our shared value partnerships, and our skills-based volunteering programs, really to leverage the financial assets, the human capital, the talents and skills of our employees, and the relationships that we have with our clients and our customers to be able to create social impact. We focus on a couple of different areas around closing the skills gap, providing more access, new products and tools that are relevant to help to wealth building products for individuals. We focus in on communities like Newark and strengthening communities and really building the infrastructure. We support disasters and humanitarian crises globally, and really think about the capacity support for nonprofit organizations across the board. I think one of the partnerships that highlights the way that we operate is in our headquarters cities of Newark. Like I said, we were founded and we're still headquartered there. And I think one of the unique traits of this company is that when we saw the uprising in 1967, our company was one of the very few that chose to stay and to be part of the solution and not part of leaving a city in disarray at the time. And so I think some of the relevant lessons learned from back then to today. And one of the initiatives that we helped create was a public-private partnership with the mayor's office and with the anchor institutions in this community, which is the Hire, Buy, Live Local initiative, which is the mayor's initiative to really help more residents, new residents come into the city of Newark to help build a middle class, to really help encourage anchor institutions, companies like Prudential, to hire more local residents, and then to encourage anchor institutions to procure locally, and so to build a small business ecosystem in the city of Newark to funnel back more of the profits that are coming in. And all of that is all towards building and driving an inclusive economic growth, that there is shared prosperity, and it's not just companies like ours that are prospering in communities like Newark.
I mean, I love your story. It's always great to hear how a company is founded and how that ethos has carried through and is bringing you along in times like this. So thank you so much for sharing. So obviously we've heard a lot about public-private partnerships, partnerships with government. And I'm gonna maybe merge a couple questions here and give you a chance to all answer this. But what makes a partnership impactful? What holds true for all partnerships? What do you really look for in a partnership to make it meaningful? And, if you could talk a little bit about, high impact partnerships, critical components of partnerships, that would be great. And so I'll just kind of jump back to Bill, if that's okay.
Sure.
We'll do the same order.
Happy to go first. So I think for now, in 40 years, I think one of the things we've learned that's kind of consistent across all types of partnerships, and we certainly have them, right? Whether it's we're working with, as I said, working within school systems, working with employers, and we like to joke because those are very different cultures, right? They operate on different time schedules, different times of the year. I mean, there's just all kinds of things you have to navigate. But I think one thing is really consistent is finding shared value. Right? Shared value is so important in a partnership. I think, operating from, and so where the mission is clear, so a clearly defined sense of purpose, and an understanding where the value is. I think just being able to identify those two things up front, so early and often in a partnership, and revisiting those and making sure we're checking in and having a regular heartbeat of evaluating that, I think is critical to success for any long-standing partnership.
Mm-hmm. And critical components that you really look for. What holds true for all really solid partnerships?
I think coming to them with I like to call it, coming to it with a giving sense, not just the what do I need, but what can I give? I think the partnerships that we've seen that last over time are ones where people kind of come with that mindset. And giving doesn't necessarily mean, people often think of that in terms of dollars and cents. But it's not just that. It could be of time. It could be of strategy and purpose. I mean, there's lots of things that we can give, right, that are assets. But I'm really speaking more to the mindset that we're approaching, that potential partnership with. So I think if you're coming to that and evaluating, is there an opportunity here for me to give? Is there something that I can help solve? I think that the partnerships that we have found most valuable are ones where, over and over in a variety of different ways, even that person or that organization has found ways to help us solve challenges that we've been working on over and over. And we have done the same for them. Again, so there's that shared value opportunity. And I think that all starts with an approach that both we and other partners are coming to the table with that says, how can we help you solve a challenge?
Yeah. So it's about being mutually supportive and really working together. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much, Bill. Andrea?
Yeah, I mean, I think similar to Bill, but maybe phrased slightly differently, is one thing we really look for in strong and impactful partnerships is mission alignment. So we never want an organization that we're partnering with, whether it's a co-investment partner or a nonprofit partner, to try to take on our mission as theirs. And we also conversely don't want to do that in reverse. We really want to make sure that that the partners that we're working with, we're aligned mission. We're not creeping mission from one organization to another, which doesn't necessarily mean it has to be the exact same thing, but that we're really working toward a shared outcome and really looking to make the same type of impact. I think one way that comes through and sort of what we look for in a partnership is that we're allowing expertise to lie where it lies. So as a corporation, we don't necessarily have expertise in youth development or in community building, but our community partners do. So we really look for folks to bring the expertise that they have to the partnership and allow that to shine, rather than sort of trying to, have different organizations that don't necessarily have expertise play that role. Really letting expertise be the key. And then I think the other thing that we really look for from our partners is creativity and innovation in problem solving. So there's a lot of things that have been done many times and are effective, but there's also a lot of really new and innovative ways to solve problems or bring partners together, and being willing to be flexible in that way and not just sort of try a one size fits all solution, I think is super important for partnerships to come together.
Thank you. That's really important. I think the inclusivity is interesting because sometimes we think we have the answers, right? But then we sit down and we start to unpack things, and we find out that somebody may have a different approach or a different philosophy, and it's always good to have those conversations and kind of reflect and learn from each other. And as we often say, kind of leave your baggage at the door, and let's just communicate and learn from each other and figure out where we can bring our expertise together to solve a problem. Thank you. Rahim?
Yeah, there's on our campus in Seattle, we have an inscription of an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Yeah.
And so I think, there is a real, when I think about partnerships and collaboration from a impact investing or a philanthropic perspective, what I would say is that many of the problems we are trying to affect change against are really deep, intractable structural problems. And so just on a very basic level, collaboration with other funders is an opportunity for aggregation of capital, right? So for us, even though we are one of the world's biggest philanthropies, our dollars are still not enough in the various strategies we deploy to necessarily affect the kind of change and reform that's necessary. And so, just that one opportunity of like more dollars, more aligned dollars with a shared purpose is such a critical, powerful tool to really affect deep change against really intractable problems. At the same time, I would say part of the opportunity with those collaborations, and this picks up on Andrea's point, is, there is value in difference. We are different organizations with different perspectives. And I think there is a strength in that diversity of approach, in mindset, in knowledge, experience, to come together as funders to try to affect change. When I think about, the critical things that are required for success in those partnerships, there's a lot of generic things like trust, open communication, right? Revealing the blind spots that we have and the biases that we have. We operate in certain geographical areas, other funders operate in others. One of the things that I think is really powerful, at least on the philanthropic side, is what are you measuring? How do we measure impact? And so when I think about productive collaborations amongst investors and funders, it often gets real with okay, well, what's the metric? How are we going to measure our progress as we co-invest? And are we aligned on what we're measuring? Are we disaggregating the data? Are we looking at impacts for students by race, by economics, et cetera? So those are the things that I think are fundamental to really drive successful partnerships on the philanthropic side.
That's so important. I mean, and you hit on something. Every single one of you are working on really big issues, right? And you're trying to solve problems that have been around for a long time. And partnerships really take time. It's not easy. It's like, I say it's like, getting to know your fiance and ultimately getting married, the longer you're together, the more you learn and the better you understand one another, but they're worth it, right? So thank you for that. And Sarah, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, and there's so much I agree with what everybody said in terms of what makes an effective partnership. The two things that I'll add that most people did already touch upon is patience, for sure, and data. So when we were trying to build this Anchor Collaborative to ultimately launch this Hire by Live local initiative, we brought in researchers, and it started in 2013, and we said, do a data analysis for us. And that's when we found out 18% of the jobs in Newark are not by city residents. They're filled by people who live outside of the city. We found out that less than 25% of people in Newark own their homes. These are like the data points that we needed to bring that shared agenda to everybody. And then from that data, the Anchor Collaborative didn't launch until 2017. So from that research point to getting the buy-in, so to having people come around the table and agree to certain measurements and outcomes, it took some time. And so from our perspective with this particular partnership, it was really having the patience to be persistent, to know that there is a greater purpose in terms of why you're being persistent. But then also having the data to back up why you want to do this partnership and why you think it's so important for what you're trying to all achieve.
That's really great. Thank you. I'm
Cheryl,
sorry.
Cheryl, if I could add
Yes,
one
you
more.
bet.
This is so great. I just, you know, I can see why we're all together. There's so much here. But I would add another thing that I think is really critically important is taking the time to make sure that you're aligned in your values, right? Having shared values, I think it's something else you're hearing that's kind of, you know, suddenly, but I just wanted to call that out because I think, you know, sometimes we rush past that and we're looking at a lot of other maybe potentially motivating factors, but we don't spend the time thinking about, are we aligned either individually, you know, if it's a, you know, professional partnership you're working on, or organizationally in terms of, you know, something, a bigger project or something you're going to collaborate on together, taking the time to find out, you know, do we really have shared values in alignment? Because, you know, sometimes if you don't, that can really lead to some challenges down the road.
Absolutely.
And won't sustain your partnerships over time.
I see a lot of heads shaking there. Does anybody want to add to this before we move to another question? This is a great conversation.
I mean, I would just say, like, and building that alignment takes, like, to the point that we just mentioned, right? It takes time, it takes effort, it takes energy, it takes real, some deep conversations sometimes, right? Uncomfortable conversations. So you can't underestimate the importance of that to produce a really valuable longer term collaboration.
Right.
It takes effort and work.
Yeah, I mean, I can think back to, you know, many years ago, and, you know, we've all learned things along the way. And I think back to partnerships that we tried to make happen. And I realized that maybe I wasn't as open, or we weren't as open, or maybe we didn't talk about our values, or maybe it wasn't moving fast enough and we were, you know, impatient. And you know, fortunately, we've learned from that. Now we understand that it takes time, but you still have to keep things moving, right? And so you start with, you know, if you're aligned on your values and you agree that there's a direction you want to go, how do you begin to take steps where you're really trying out that relationship, and then you're, you know, reflecting, how did that work when we did this project together, and how can we improve it and make it better the next time? And so I think this is a really exciting conversation. Thank you all for this. And I know that I'm looking at time here, so I want to be cognizant we have lots of questions, but I am going to throw out a couple others. As leaders in this field, in your field, right, and the work that you're doing, what is, you know, maybe one piece of practical advice that you, and you were starting to touch on this, and you can either answer, you know, what is one piece of practical advice, or, you know, what do you really need to look out for when things have gone bad? You know, why was that? And feel free to answer within a range, but, and I'll just throw this out to the team, whoever would like to answer it.
I mean, I think a lot of what we've been talking about is, when I think back about the themes of what makes partnerships successful and those elements, it's the due diligence that's done up front in making sure that you have done all of that work before you even launch something. And so really the advice, I think, is to front load all of the important conversations in the beginning of partnership development, so that you're not then finding yourself 6 months down the road without having had the critical conversations.
Anybody else?
I think building on that, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Rahim.
I think building on that, I think we often get so many opportunities to collaborate, to partnership. And I think there's, it's almost like this strategic assessment of like, it goes back to a bit of what Bill said about alignment. Like, are we aligned? Do we agree on either the problem definition or the goal of what we're trying to achieve? And there has to be some like upfront assessment, to Andrea's point also, of like, okay, is this gonna get us to where we need to go? Is it worth the effort to build that alignment or to really engage deeply? And that's not always easy, right? Like sometimes we're all moving fast, we're all, you know, multiple people are reaching out to us. And I just think like sometimes you have to like, it's that whole thing about going slow to have impact, right? Like you do need to sometimes pause and assess like, okay, I have all these different opportunities, and do that analysis of which of these are the most equitable, are going to yield the most impact. And I just say that's hard. Like that's not always easy. Like it's really not always easy. And like I'll just say for myself, like I'm sure I've flubbed some of those things before. Like I'm sure there's opportunities I didn't invest enough in, and I'm sure there's opportunities that I overinvested in, and it didn't quite yield the impact that I was hoping for. So just to say like that's important work, figuring out, you know, which of these are the most likely to get us to where we need to go.
Thank you, Sarah. Did you want to add?
Sure. Yeah, I'll say, you know, agree with everything Andrea and Rahim had said. I think part of what didn't work in partnerships, whether it was, you know, our work in Newark or other partnerships that we have nationally, is when you don't set up the roles and expectations up front. I think that can be misleading for people later on when you don't make sure that both organizations or multiple organizations have the same capacity to take on that shared work that you're trying to do. I think that's also really hard. And so and because the work in Newark is about coalition building, it's also making sure that everybody still feels like their voice is being heard. Even if they're not speaking up in the big meeting, having that conduit that makes sure that every single organization has their voice heard, gives the proper feedback, so it doesn't become that they suddenly are starting to like back away without you realizing why. Because particularly this work in Newark, it's so codependent on all of us. Like all of the anchor institutions have to commit to procuring locally. And that's like in a large corporation, there's many, many systems behind that. So how do you make sure that everybody's on the same page around that and has this capacity to do it?
That's really great. And I think you guys are beginning to answer some of the questions I'm looking at. One of the questions are, what are the biggest challenges or threats to effective partnerships, and how do you overcome them? And let me see. So sorry, I thought there was one very similar here that I was looking at.
Well, while you're doing that,
Yep.
Cheryl, I can jump in on that one because I think it really ties into what I wanted to add to my colleagues here. You know, there's this, I think, you know, we live right now in a time where immediate gratification is kind of the expectation, right? And everything is instantaneous, right? I expect immediate results. I want immediate connection. I want immediate. And solid relationships, if you're listening to all the things that we've been saying thus far, right, take time. So I think one of the biggest challenges to forming a long-standing, highly valuable relationship is resisting the urge, right, to expect immediate results all the time. And so I think picking up on one of the things Rahim said, I mean, I think, and I know it's a little cliche, but thinking about crawl before you walk before you run, and then run before you run fast. So as you think about, you know, building a partnership, I think you really have to be intentional about, you know, allowing for that time frame, you know, to get established, to you know, to allow that space to do the crawling, to then do the walking, and then do the running, and then do the run fast. Because I think if you're in alignment with each other, and I'm saying that whether it's individually or organizationally, around the expectations that that's going to be the pace and not that it's going to be immediate, I think that takes a lot of the pressure off of the building of a long-standing partnership.
Great. Thank you very much. It's so true. I have another question for you from the group. This is great. What strategies would you recommend for a new CSR education program to begin building meaningful partnerships and let's say, and gaining buy-in from the C-suite as to why that investment and partnership is worthwhile.
Is that directed to all of us? Or?
Anybody who'd like to jump in on that one?
Well, I'm certainly happy to go first. We do a lot of that. If you look at our board of directors, we're very fortunate to have a lot of C-suite supporters. And one of the things that we always focus on, again, and not to be repetitive, but it's around that aligned value. So a lot of the organizations that we're partnering with or going to consider to approach to get involved with our work, I think Andrea and others have said, it's really important to do that due diligence up front. We know going in that either they themselves and or their organizations are aligned with us on the values and the problems that we're seeking to solve in society. And so our pitch, if you will, our approach to them to say, we need you to get involved, starts with their understanding, their focus, and ideally, as I said before, some of their challenges that they're confronting in trying to address the problems that we're seeing together. So we're coming at it. Look, if we form a partnership, we're going to be able to to tackle some things that you've been working on for a while and have not yet been able to solve. But we think by combining efforts and assets, we're in a much better position. And I think to Sarah's point earlier as well, bringing data to that conversation, right, around that, and having some proof points and some ideally some track record around some of the things that you've done either individually or organizationally that work. The more that you can bring into that kind of conversation ups the degree of success in bringing that potential person on board with you.
It's very true, Bill. And I, if I could take a stab at just saying this, I have a colleague, Rick Delano, who has always said, as it relates to education, people in the C-suite, they either need a workforce or they want to sell their products and they need people in their community that can afford to buy their products. So well-educated, students, or it's the right thing to do. But there is clearly a way to speak to them and get at what there's enough information out there to find out what keeps them up at night and what they talk a lot about. And if you look at their, foundations, their corporate foundations, there's a lot of information there. So it's really tailoring the message. And once you get them on board as an advocate, they'll mobilize people behind the scenes to support you. And I know Bill and Andrea and all of you, know that because Sarah, you're all dealing with that. So again, I'm looking at time here. I just want to be cognizant. So let's see.
Can I add something to that?
Sure, you do that while I'm looking. I'm sorry, I'm not a good multitasker.
No, that's great. So I think one thing, just a point of advice is and we're certainly have been guilty of this in the past, is, resisting the urge to keep inventing new things without really understanding what's already in play. Like, who are the other exemplars in the field? What's worked? What's not worked? So kind of where can we add value, right? Like, where can we bring either capital or creativity to a problem or to a set of partners? I think sometimes the thing I think about in philanthropy is if there was more collaboration amongst funders, we might actually do more and achieve more and have a greater impact. And yet that's hard because, we each have a certain point of view. We're a family foundation. So we have we're very guided by the beliefs and the vision of our founders, but yet some of these problems, like I alluded to earlier, do require systemic reforms and systemic efforts. And it will literally take the field coalescing together to move that work to the finish line, and I wish we saw more of that, frankly.
The other thing to add, I think, for the person who's trying to convince their C-suite that the partnerships that you're looking at or the work that you're doing is important to the company is not neglecting the business imperative around the triple bottom line. There's no generation that exists right now, even our older generations are starting to buy into this. And so I feel like, it's analysis that's important to do around your entire CSR portfolio, and will go a long ways towards getting C-suite buy-in.
I'll echo
you.
that. Just also just because even if it's not a new CSR program, when you have new leadership that comes in, you're always going to have to be justifying, you know, the strategy that you have and the grants that you're giving out. And I think it's really important to meet with each leader one-on-one to help them better understand. Because I find this not even just with a company C-suite, but just any group meeting. Having the one-on-one meetings prior to going into the group meeting really helps them understand and gets them to ask you the questions. And I think what Andrea said is really connecting it to the business goals and priorities of what you're trying to accomplish. So people don't see this as a side good thing we're doing, but doesn't have any impact to me as a business leader. And then I also think getting your employees engaged in the programs that you're supporting, whether it's on volunteer, matching gifts, that also creates a groundswell. Like I remember a few years ago when we had a head of new US businesses come on board, he was going around meeting with employees all across the country. And in the morning, he met with people who were part of our volunteer councils in each of our business locations. And then in the afternoon, he was meeting with the highest performers of that business location. And about 2-3 meetings in, he was like, I need to change up the schedule, because he was meeting the same people in the morning that he was meeting with the high performers in the afternoon. So it gives that kind of relevance around employee engagement, retention, promotion, leadership development, all those opportunities that help bring salient points to your C-suite.
Thank you. That's great. So a couple other questions. How do you define return on investment in terms of your organization's direct engagement with students via projects, internships, mentoring? And then there was one other question, and I'll let you guys decide what you want to answer. How are you adjusting your investment strategy related to your social impact programs to support nonprofit partners in this moment when unrestricted dollars are so critical to sustain core programs? Two very different questions, but feel free to answer either one of those.
I can take the latter question. I think we are, you know, all of us are working towards, you know, removing barriers to economic and social mobility. And so what's happening with COVID-19 and with the outrage to the police brutality and the structural racism that exists in this country is all coalescing, right? It's like almost like a perfect storm of everything that's happening. And we made the decision many years ago that even though from our grantee partners, we ask for specific outcomes, we ask, you know, we hope that the programs that they are proposing to do are going to produce the results. Our grant dollars have always been general operating dollars. We say you use the funds the way that you need best, while we, you know, expect some results at the end of the grant cycle. And I think that has been helpful for organizations that need capacity support, staff support, all of that throughout the years. And now is even more relevant given all of the changes. We have made modifications as fast as possible when there are, you know, really great changes that need to be made. If we were supporting an endowment and they need general operating support now, thinking about how their programs need to scale because of the surging demand, or if they have to shift, you know, if they were having new revenue models that were coming in and no longer can do that. We've just been really open, but also obviously the relief and recovery, I think we are all really focused on that, because this is not just a 3-month issue. It's going to be for a few years, if not longer. And so really thinking about how each of our nonprofit partners need additional capacity, need to expand their services, and need to survive the financial crisis that we're still in as well too.
So I can speak, Cheryl, to the previous question around student, you know, at the end of the day, how do we measure student impact? And for us at NAP, it's about, as I said, you know, our mission is graduating high school students college and career ready. So I can give you an example where, you know, we have a certification where students, you know, complete their programs of study, you know, get a paid internship and complete that successfully as it's evaluated by a, you know, supervisor of an internship, and then graduate from high school. We have a platform. So not only do we award that certification, but then we have a platform where we're working with our employer partners and also some post-secondary partners to be able to track young people, not only where they are while they're in their academy experience and how they're progressing, but also where do they choose to go after they leave the academy? Are they going to a 2-year, or are they going to a 4-year? Are they having, to Rahim's point earlier, are they having success? And hopefully we're aligning other programs that our partners have at the post-secondary level. And then ultimately, we want to be able to measure, do young people get life-sustaining careers in some organization and finding value in a career ultimately? So I think that's the ultimate measure for us. Do we help young people, to achieve, their career success? So I think, being able to have clear metrics like that around your impact are really important.
Excellent. Thank you.
I would love to add on to that. When we think about the ROI to the company from the work that we do in the community, we actually explicitly don't measure it. And that's somewhat controversial, I think, amongst corporate foundations in particular. But, as we think about the work that we're doing in the community and trying to tie that back to the business imperative, where it comes out for us is around employee engagement. As Sarah mentioned, that's the kind of, if we were to think about a key driver around benefit to the company, it's there. And we do track engagement scores and all of that as it relates to employees participating in community programs, but tracking student outcomes back to ROI, we made a decision to separate that a little bit and really think about it from an employee-focused lens, which has a number of benefits, one of which being that it's a lot easier to track. But also, we wanted to separate the social good from the business bottom line. And so not trying to tie student outcomes into ROI was really important for us in that perspective, and really focusing that ROI piece around employee engagement instead.
Great. Thank you very much. That is very different. And that's, and employee involvement is incredibly important in volunteerism, and especially for the younger generation. They really want to be in the community doing something good. It's not about giving dollars, big dollars, and wondering where it's going to. They want to be involved. And so making sure your employees are happy is really important. So we have about 9 minutes. I have one question that I think is really interesting, and then I'd love to give you all just a minute or two to closing thoughts, anything that you'd like to add. This is a great question, and this goes to purposeful endings, Bill. I hear NAF uses that term from time to time, but I'd love all of you to have a chance to address this. What is your advice for reviewing existing partnerships and potentially exiting some that have run their course or are no longer mission aligned?
Yeah, happy to jump in on that, because we do spend time thinking about that, and I think it goes to something that Rahim said earlier in our conversation. Sometimes it takes real courage to have you have to have some courageous conversations, and I think one of the things that can do harm in a relationship is to try to carry it on when one or both partners are not feeling like there's real value there anymore, or we're starting to drift, or whatever the challenges are. So if you feel like you can't work out whatever those issues are, I think it's really important to have the courage to sit down, have a conversation about where we are and where we're trying to go, and if the path forward doesn't seem feasible, then to just acknowledge that and to say, hey, no harm, no foul. We've had a good run. We've accomplished. Here's what we've got. I think take stock into what you've accomplished and say, let's end it here, not forever, but let's end it here for right now. And there may be partnership opportunities for us in the go forward. I think trying to hang on, I think sometimes we make mistakes, because you could do more damage in a relationship. So we like to call it, purposeful endings. Let's tie off this piece of work. Let's celebrate it, most importantly, and then leave space and opportunity for something that could happen going forward, or it may not. But that you've had a purposeful ending to the work that you've done to that date.
Excellent. Anybody else like to jump in on that one?
I'll jump in. I think that I would argue that the collaborations and partnerships that are going to be most successful, they've actually had that conversation on the front end, right? Like, so what are the exit ramps? What are the off ramps? What are the boundaries that would precipitate like us changing course, or whether it's resolving conflict or maintaining alignment. I mean, at a certain point, there is the context, like has the situation changed such that this collaboration is actually not really relevant or valuable or impactful? Is the need somehow different now? Has the need evolved? But I think there's also the you know, what Bill and others have alluded to around values. Like, are we still aligned on what, you know, what we're trying to solve and how we're trying to solve and how we show up into that partnership? I think one of the challenges I've observed, especially in philanthropy, is just when you see people come and go. And so you might have had a really great relationship with a grant maker or a leader at a certain philanthropy, and there's been a transition. And this probably is beyond just philanthropy, but like you see a new individual come in and they don't have the context, or they don't necessarily buy into the same vision, and you know, and then the relationship could get strained, or et cetera. So like, that's a natural dynamic, but I think that partnerships and collaborations that think that through, governance, like how are we governing this relationship? Is that governance transparent so it can outlast the people that are coming and going? I mean, that's such a critical part of building collaborations to outlast individuals that I think really we ought to think about.
It's beautiful. It's like almost setting up some norms in the beginning about how we're gonna deal with conflict and issues. And yeah, that's great. So we have about 4 minutes left. That gives you 30 seconds to a minute for some wrap-up comments. And Sarah, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. I will say, you know, I think from everything that we've heard, having honest, transparent conversations from the very beginning is super important. I think knowing that you are going to hit roadblocks and not feeling like if you hit the first roadblock, it's all over, but know that you can go through these valleys and highs together and know what your shared outcome is. I think the reason why we all want to create partnerships is to be able to leverage each other's assets and capacities, to be able to problem solve together, to be able to share risk, to be able to amplify and advance results. And I would say those are the really key components for why we partner, and to really make sure that all the components that we discussed are just consistently on top of everyone's minds, because that could get lost when you're like doing the actual work.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Rahim?
I just want to go back to something I said earlier, and I think something we all agree with, which is there is real value in these partnerships, and yet it takes effort, right? So what I would say is like, you know, have a growth mindset. Like, it's going to take struggle, it's going to take practice, it's going to take effort, but you get better at it through doing more and more partnerships. And again, the problems that many of us are trying to solve, no one organization can solve those problems on their own, and we need to partner, we need to collaborate. So let's keep doing it, let's practice it, let's learn from it, let's get better at it, and let's do more of it. That's what I would say.
Thank you, Rahim. Andrea?
I think my colleagues have said some wonderful things already. So I think what I would add is to be brave about knowing who you are, what your mission is, and being willing to reflect and share in the work that you're doing with others, and understanding that the go far and go fast mindset is super important. And so being both brave enough to bring other people in and brave enough to share the credit and the work, and being brave enough to reflect on really what is your goals, will really allow you to be successful in partnership development. The other thing I'll say is we are super interested in having more partners. My inbox is open. Send me a message if you're interested in partnering with us.
I will say before we turn it over to Bill that there are a lot of questions that you guys might want to look at and personally answer related to your work. So do that. Bill?
Yeah, well, maybe I'll end on a Shakespearean note and say, you know, to thine own self be true, right? Authenticity. You know, at the end of the day, be authentic, whether, you know, individually or as your organization, be true to your mission, be true to yourself. I think, people respect, if people who are going to partner with you are going to respect your authenticity and value that the most. So this has been an awesome conversation. I'm proud to have been a part of it.
Well, I am honored to have been your moderator. You guys are all amazing. I hope that we have a chance to somehow collaborate together in the future. But in the meantime, I hope that you all, the attendees, enjoyed it, and I'll give you a virtual high five. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great panel.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Yes.